Welcome back to Less Stress for You and I. This episode will be dealing with music and how music can be therapeutic. Music and musical performance can alter your life. The sound of music is a powerful experience. There are two types of music, a live band of which there is nothing that can compare, that feeling of complete sound around you. A band is a very easy to come by, but very hard to maintain members of a band. It is just like it employs a group of people. As you know, when you have a group of people, it is very hard to keep a frame of mind. So we all must have a common goal or a common understanding of what it is that we want to do in the relationship to the music. Creating a band and playing music is hard work, and playing well is even harder. In that hard work, that mastering of one's instrument is what gives a band its culture. That means no personal conflicts, having common musical aspirations. The thing that I just talked about in the past paragraph is called a vibe, and that is what can keep a group together, and when you've got it, things are great, and you feel it and you can see it on stage, the way that the players move around and connect to each other on stage. Music is a language that is very effective. It has a range of emotions from sad to happy, to excited, to terrified, and many more. Music is a form of communication which sometimes can touch people that know one and know things that can do other things in order to help people understand themselves. When the music is captured, it can be played back so that others can benefit from that same feeling that the music brought out in a recording and played music. The bottom line is that music has power to change things. Early in life, I was told that there are three things in life that can change you from the outside to the inside. Number one, food, something from the outside that can change the way you feel on the inside. Number two, the air you breathe, something from the outside that you need on the inside. Number three, music, something from the outside that can change the way you feel on the inside. If you have any tips for us, please contact us at morrismorris910yahoo.com. Back to you, Saran.
Right now, you may recognize this handsome gentleman next to us. However, this is the doppelganger of our executive producer. This is jazz enthusiast, master saxophonist, Red Jim. Red, welcome to the show. Thank you for being here. My brother, I got a couple of questions I wrote down, if you'd be so kind.
Yes, sir.
Do you know when the first jazz festival occurred in the States?
Well, actually, I did a little research, and what I had came up with, and there may be a little controversy about this, but the earliest record I had found of was 1954, and that was in regards to the Newport Jazz Festival. And that was by a gentleman by the name of, I believe, George Wine, and W-I-E-N. And I believe Mr. Wine was one of the first individuals to actually have a jazz festival, and that was in 1954. And I have to say that it couldn't have been a greater year to start a jazz festival than the year I was born.
Okay.
A little bit too much information,
but... A little too much, but okay. So, since the 20th century, how do you think has jazz advanced?
I believe jazz has advanced in the 20th century by the number of different showcases for different individuals. Jazz, on its first inception, was looked upon as a back room and not a purebred music, but over the years it has taken its place in the history of the American music, and also being one of the only individual American music that's created in America.
Okay, very good. Which jazz album do you think stand out the most in our time?
I would have to say, and that's a very hard question. There's so many greats, but some of the most celebrated would be like John Coltrane. I believe jazz has advanced in the 20th century by the number of different showcases for different individuals. Jazz, on its first inception, was looked upon as a back room and not a purebred music, but over the years it has taken its place in the history of the American music, and also being one of the only individual American music that's created in America.
Okay, very good. Which jazz album do you think stand out the most in our time?
I would have to say, and that's a very hard question. There's so many greats, but some of the most celebrated would be like Coleman Hawkins.
At the piano, Johnny Guarneri. The guitarist, Joseph Barry Galbraith. On the bass, Milt Hinton. And drummer man, Cozy Cole. Well, look who just made the scene. Coleman Hawkins.
What did you blowing, Daddy? Let's do a little lover man there. About 5, you know.
Stanley Turrentine.
One.
Gato Barbier.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Gato Barbieri.
These are all great jazz musicians. A lot of the people I just mentioned are horn players because I'm prejudiced to horns.
Okay.
But yeah, so when you ask me a question like that, I kind of key on the horn players.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's so many great players, and so it's hard to tie it down. It all depends on what you like as a jazz individual and who you like.
Okay. And then for my next question, what album would you suggest for a new fan to buy to become familiar with jazz?
Right now, currently, I would say Diana Krall. She's a very well-known jazz singer. I could also consider someone like who's doing something current right now. You know, it's kind of hard. There's just so many new artists out there, but I would say Diana Krall. And I could also say I can't think of anybody really current right now.
Okay. And then who is your favorite jazz singer and or group?
For jazz singer, I'd have to go with the classic Billie Holiday.
Southern trees bear strange fruit, blood on the leaves and blood at the root, black bodies swinging in the southern breeze, strange fruit hanging from the poplar trees. Pastoral scene of the gallant South, the bulging eyes.
For jazz group, I'd probably go with Herbie Hancock. And as an individual male singer, I'd have to say there's a guy by the name of Eddie Jefferson.
Last time I saw Janine, she looked just like a royal queen. And she cruised by with some wealthy guy in a Cadillac limousine. Last time I saw Janine. Last time I saw Janine, recalled when we were 17. Her boat was not too long ago, but too short off that long green to satisfy Janine. Now she's gone from me.
He was a great scat singer, and Eddie had just a phenomenal way of singing without using words. And scatting is called when you actually vocalize the actual music notes themselves and play scales and improvise just like a player on an instrument would. So scatting and Eddie Jefferson.
Okay. So this is kind of off of my page here, but now you got me interested. Could you give me like a real brief rendition of scat?
Skip a dooba dapa dooba da ba 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 dooba dooba dapa doo soo da ba 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 da ba 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 wow 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 wow.
Wow, 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 wow. I like that. Okay. Okay, so then, when were you first exposed to jazz?
I believe I was first exposed to jazz around early age, 12, 13, 14 years old. Yeah, I had a mentor, and he was into jazz, and we one summer took a real book, and a real book is a book of standards that all the great jazz tunes are in. They're very expensive, so there's a real book, and then when you can't afford them, there's a fake book. So we took a fake book, like a real book and a fake book one summer, and sat down and went through the whole real book, taking copies of pages out of them and writing a fake book of our own.
Okay, that works for me. So in the Twin Cities, are there venues for jazz musicians?
Yes, there's great venues. Minneapolis is, like they say, for the arts. And there are great venues in Minneapolis, St. Paul. One that comes to mind, it used to be a staple in Minneapolis, was the Artist Quarters. But the Artist Quarters, a number of years ago, moved to St. Paul. That was one of the main venues for Minneapolis. And some of the other clubs, there's some blues clubs, but blues is so close to jazz, and they all come from the same background. Shaw's, also Walensky's in St. Paul, Walensky's Blues Saloon, which is in St. Paul, and a number of other nice clubs. The Dakota, it's a great venue, there's quite a few jazz club venues in the Twin Cities and St. Paul.
All right, I guess for my final question, if I may, what would you recommend to someone that wants to get into jazz as a musician? How would you recommend they go about learning?
First of all, they need to find what it is that motivates them about jazz and what type of jazz that they like, because there's so many different styles of jazz.
Why don't you give us a brief rundown on that?
So, for instance, we could start from way back to ragtime, then we go to swing, then we would go to bebop, then we go to modern jazz, and then we could go to what's considered now smooth jazz. So there's a number of different venues and a number of different styles of jazz. So I guess first of all, finding what out of all the different styles appeals to you as an individual. And then look at some of the other individuals that you idolize that do that type of style that you're interested in.
Okay. I guess that wasn't my final question. My final question is this.
Okay.
Would you say that jazz is perhaps one of the most difficult genres to master?
I'd say yes, and I'd say no. I'd say for one instance, for a performer, jazz is, I don't want to say easy, but what I want to say is that because it's such a open interpretation type music, it lends itself to improvising. So a person doesn't have to have a set format like traditional music.
Okay.
You actually could come in and actually play what you feel. And if you can expound upon what you feel, that's called improvising, whereas you take a basic scale and a basic melody and play what it is you feel within the confines of the scale that you're playing. On the other hand, for a listener, some people don't like jazz because it's considered that it's too demanding intellectually for an individual, because it does require being able to sit down, listen to the music, and just find your way through the music, in the music. So a lot of people would say, well, like, it's just too difficult and it requires too much to listen to jazz, but I believe that's a part of it, to where you sit back, relax, and get immersed in the music, and let the music immerse itself in you.
Very good, very good. Well, I want to thank you, Red Jim, for coming through and turning us on to this fantastic piece that is American-born that we call jazz. Thank you, sir.
Thank you as well, sir.
Mm-hmm. And back to you, Jimmy.
Hi, it's Jimmy's Rage. I'm back. This episode is The Love of Music. There has been so many musicians who have died in 2015 and 2016 that have passed away. And at this time, we would like to mention just a few. In 2015, Mr. Jazzman himself, Ornette Coleman, died June 11th at the age of 85 years young from cardiac arrest. Mr. Bluesman, Percy Sledge, died April 14th at the age of 74 years old from liver cancer. His classic hit, When a Man Loves a Woman. Nicholas Caldwell of the Whispers died January 5th at the age of 71 years young of a heart attack. Otis Clay, Mr. Bluesman, Let Me Blues You Before I Lose You, died on January 7th. Mr. David Bowie, Let's Dance, died January 10th at the age of 69 years old of cancer. With the elements of earth, wind, and fire, Mr. Maurice White, Do You Remember the 21st Day of September, died at the age of 74 from Parkinson's. Just to name a few in the music history books. At this time, though, I would like to mention someone a little closer to home, a local man of men. Mr. Morris Wilson, born April 26, 1939, passed away on January 8, 2016, at Hennepin County Medical Center in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Morris entered Grant Grade School, moved on to Franklin Junior High, moved to South Side of Minneapolis, and completed at Bryant Junior High. In 1960, he graduated from Central High School. In the 1970s, Morris attended the University of Minnesota and received a BA degree in history and social work. Morris was employed by the Hennepin County as a probation officer. Morris left his Hennepin County probation gig in the 1980s. In the late 80s, he began to play jazz full-time and became a fierce saxophonist around the Twin Cities. Morris, he didn't just play jazz, he lived it. He was one of the most talented tenor saxophone players that Minneapolis ever produced. His early influences were Lester Young, Charlie Parker, Sonny Rollins, John Coltrane, and Joe Henderson. But Miles Davis was his hero. Morris was associated with Prince, Muddy Water, Percy Hughes, The Temptations, Ike and Tina Turner, Iron Williams, Dave Carr, Mojo Bedford, Dickie Lowe, Anthony Scott, Bobby Lyle, Frank Edwards, Paul McGee, Roberta Davis, Tom Anderson, and the list goes on. Morris was a tireless advocate for equal rights and social and racial justice. He made numerous television and radio appearances to raise consciousness and demand reform. When disco became popular on local nightclubs, owners were hiring DJs. Morris was at the forefront of the movement to reinvigorate the club scene with live music. He led a march downtown, Hennepin Avenue, crying out, Disco is jive, bring back the live. In passing, Morris was a leader and a man of the times in great standing with the community. God bless you. Rest in peace. Hi, and we're back. We're with Sharon, and we're talking about the 2015 Jazz Festival in St. Paul at Mears Park. And this is going to be sponsored by AARP. Now, we're doing a few interviews in regards to asking people how do they feel about jazz. And as you know, our show is called Less Stress for You and I. Jazz plays a real important part in relaxing people and calming people down, and jazz enthusiasts really love the fact that the music puts you in a place which is a better place. And here I have with me Mr. Saran, who has a great knowledge of what he feels about jazz and certain individuals in the jazz field. Saran,
Yes, sir.
in the 20th century, what would you say is some of the more familiar music that you remember in regards to jazz?
20th century, of course, you have to go to people like the great Billie Holiday.
Southern trees bear strange fruit.
Etta James.
Oh, sometimes I get a good feeling, yeah. And I get a feeling that I never had before, no.
Well, for me, I would guess it'd be people like Chick Corea. Now, wasn't Louis Armstrong a jazz player?
Yes,
I mean,
indeed.
He's one of the greats.
Yes, he did.
Hello, Dolly. This is Louis Dolly. Mighty glad to have you back where you belong. You lookin' swell, Dolly. I can tell, Dolly. You keep going, still going, you still going strong.
Yeah.
And then like a cross between, I think, blues and jazz was the late great B.B. King.
Glad you mentioned that.
Yes, sir. The legend.
Just passed away.
Yes, sir. The master.
Yep, 89
And,
years old.
God rest your soul, baby. We're gonna miss you. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. You know, BB said, they asked BB King, what did you want most out of your music? He says, I wanted peace. I want people to be at peace. So he said if he accomplished that in life,